Another thing with Salma, she doesn't realize that she's being used as a dragon. She just got the cover of Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition. This should be headlines, Salma is still hot, she's still sexy, she's on the cover.
Right.
But yet the headlines for her, if you look into SEO, is Salma Hayek speaks on Ryan and Blake, or on Taking Her
Oh,
Kids.
oh,
Salma Hayek
yeah.
seen with Blake Lively. It's like, this should be your moment. Why is it not your
Ah.
moment? Why is it about Blake Lively?
She doesn't realize that all of the oxygen in the room that should be there for her own projects and for her own achievements and stuff, that it's being sucked out basically by the Blake and Ryan and Baldoni mess. No, that's true. So I know that some of my viewers have been wondering when when is the wig coming back? And it is back, y'all, although it is frayed. The reason that the wig is kind of frayed is because I was trying to play Blake Lively in the parody, and so she's got that frizzy hair, right? Anyway, CJ, what's been going on this week? I know that we have gotten all of these Taylor Swift revelations. So I guess we want to talk about that. Do you know the latest with the Taylor Swift stuff?
Yeah, so I actually had posted a video on my YouTube channel on some of the Taylor Swift updates, if you guys wanted to check that out. But basically, right now, Brian Friedman has made an affidavit, a sworn affidavit under penalty or perjury, where he now doubles down on his allegations that that Blake Lively asked Taylor Swift to delete text messages, and that allegedly her lawyer called Blake Lively's lawyer and said, if she does not put out a public statement about why she was absent at the Super Bowl or her Super Bowl absence, in support of Blake Lively, then I will release 10 years worth of private text messages. Now, whether or not this is true, we now have Brian Friedman with a signed affidavit saying that that much is true. And he's saying that it's something that a friend of his introduced him to this person who has firsthand knowledge that this occurred. So it's almost like Taylor Swift and then the source and then a mutual friend of Brian Friedman and the source, and then it got to Brian Friedman.
I find it really hard to believe that Brian Friedman would be making this kind of declaration with the kind of tonal certainty, stylistic certainty that you see even in the writing of like this, that I yes, that he's almost basically saying, I am sure of my source and of my information, and that's why I'm proceeding this way. I find it really hard to believe that he would be doing this if he did not have a rock solid source and a rock solid indication of what he's saying. Don't you think?
Yeah, exactly. And if, there's talks about from Blake Lively's lawyer that, sanction talks, and then the judge in the case actually struck the affidavit from the docket. And what a lot of people were, saying, like, did he dismiss it? Because they didn't have the knowledge of as to what the letter to the judge was. So this was just a letter to the judge that Blake Lively initially said, "Hey, judge, just want to let you know that this is going on in Washington, D.C. with the Venable subpoena, which basically is Taylor Swift's lawyer's office, Venable. So he works there, and they got subpoenaed for this documentation because, according to Brian Friedman's affidavit, there is written communication
Right.
that is proof of this happening. So she just
Let's
kind of
just say too, because I think this is a big point, that so Brian Friedman, Baldoni's attorney, says that there is a written communique between Taylor Swift's lawyer and Blake Lively's lawyer. Am I
Mhm.
understanding?
Yes.
Because Taylor Swift, and that's, by the way, y'all, when we say Venable, again, understand that's Taylor Swift's firm, right?
Mhm.
And so Taylor Swift's firm, there's communication where apparently Taylor Swift's firm is kind of clapping back at Blake Lively's lawyer, right?
Yeah, well, according to the one of the letters to the judge prior to the affidavit, Brian Friedman wrote that the subpoena is going to be moot. It was basically in reply to Blake Lively's letting the judge know. Brian Friedman's like, okay, judge, if she's letting you know this is going on, we're letting you know that it's going to be moot here soon because Venable is actually working with us already and giving us the documentation.
So what are the implications of this?
So a lot of people thought, well, this is dismissed and it's a win for Lively and all this. But basically, what the judge said was he just struck it from the docket because neither party was asking for anything. They were just basically kind of like letting him know this was happening. And he did sort of say that if you really read into the verbiage that he used, that it was libelous or could be libelous, and that, the press was taking off with it and as if it was, the truth, but sometimes court documents aren't the truth. So he did have a little couple nuggets there that were against Baldoni, but I
So
think
basically
ultimately,
saying of Baldoni's lawyer that, look, you knew that when you sent this letter to me that it was going to cause kind of a stir and that
mhm,
people are seeing this now and that, and so and that's fair. The judge wants to call him out for that. But again, sometimes you got to displease the judge, and Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, he knows what kind of a game he's playing, which is a PR game as much or more than a legal one. So anyway, but go
so
ahead.
and it wasn't really, I would say, a win as much as I felt like the judge was just kind of like he's dealing with so much paperwork and so much stuff that he's like, "You kids go to your parents, like don't
Yeah.
come here because it's not part of his docket." And maybe eventually, when it is, he'll have to like eat crow basically and say, "I was wrong," it is true or whatever, because from what when he struck it, it seemed like he didn't even with the affidavit. What I think he wanted was the actual person to put in an affidavit saying, "This is what I heard and this is what I know."
Right,
You know what I mean? That would have
right.
maybe have been more credible to him, but I feel like he's just like, "Okay, a person of a person said something, and like, I don't wanna deal with all this. It's just let's just strike it from the record to not create chaos."
Right, right.
But we're
Now
still gonna see it in the Venable, subpoena, in Washington, DC, because they have a motion to quash that subpoena. So if they don't cooperate or anything like that, Brian Friedman will then put an opposition to that motion to quash, and in there, he'll put all his information, and eventually it'll have to come out. So we'll have to just wait and see with that. It's not over
eventually
though.
it
It's not
eventually
over.
it'll have to come out, meaning what? What is the it?
The who the person was, or
So the identity of this person that tipped Brian Friedman off to the threats from Blake Lively's team to Taylor Swift's team? Is that
Yeah,
what
because there's
you
an
okay.
active case with all 3 parties in DC,
Ah,
so I'm thinking, eventually it's going to be coming out somehow in that case.
right, right.
Where
Okay.
they're asking for that subpoena because if the judge says, "We're gonna quash it," or "We're not gonna quash it," they're gonna come back and say, "You shouldn't because of these reasons," and,
Right, right. I
eventually they're
gotcha.
gonna keep going back and
Eventually,
forth.
that kind of information, yeah, because it's essential to know who is it that we're basing all this off, whose information.